I want to talk today about racism, and I want to talk about this thing called systematic oppression, systematic racism. Um, I don't believe in that it exists because to say that it exists, it means that it's really graphic in part of the DNA of our system, of this country. And there's no evidence of that because there is no racist law in intent. What there is, however, is laws that are actually, ironically, there is laws that apparently tries to help out minorities. In the end of the day, it actually backfires, such as affirmative action or many of these socialist policies. And this is not just affects. This is more like socialism methods. That is not just. It doesn't only affect people of color, but affects white percentage of working class, like poor whites. And you have about roughly 190 million white folks, white people in this country. And maybe when it goes into poverty, make up the minority, and they're about 20 million. I'm just giving an estimate. 20 million white people are poor in this country, whereas the rest of the 150, they're usually better off and they have pretty good living conditions. But a lot of these laws, the reason why this reflects this so-called racism it's because of economic class, social class, and it affects not just poor people of color, but it also affects poor people in general, including whites. And the thing about the disadvantages of being poor is that you're not going to most likely have good connections of people of influence, that in case you get into a trouble with somebody that actually does exercise some sort of racism, has racist attitude towards you, or discrimination. If you don't have the media on your side, you're most likely not going to get out of that, or you don't have the money to afford a good lawyer. The thing is that what we do have in this country, and it's not just this country, but the entire world, is biasm, racial bias. There can be a business owner that, and it happens here in California. Many people that work in factory jobs actually prefer to hire Hispanics because of the belief and the narrative and the stereotype that they're good working people. And a lot of the stereotypes that there is amongst people, because stereotypes are there for a reason. It doesn't mean that everybody acts like that, but there are certain cultures that have different tendencies of acting certain ways. And there's a lot of bias, and it can reflect that whether it's a sports team where you prefer hiring an African American over a white person, or it can happen because of the job performance that we see how many African Americans don't do in so many good jobs, because of the statistics, the current statistics, because if we go back in time, they were one of the most hardworking people. Right now, I know it sounds it's not a political correct thing to say, but most blacks in this country do not have a good working ethic compared to other races. And because of that, I guess it can sound unfair to a hardworking black person, because now you have to work harder than you do to prove them otherwise. So this is not so much as a systematic idea. This is not so much a system that is against blacks, but this is more of a human tendency. And this racial bias, it's not just bias in race, but there's bias in age, there's bias in gender, there's color, religions, religious, political ideologies. There's a lot of biasm in this country and in the entire world. It's always been like that. But that's not something that a system can change. That is something that humans themselves need to change. You see, this bias is actually have existed since the beginning of time. And everybody's going to favor you over something. And there's some times when you're not going to receive that favor, that treatment. And I'm not saying it's okay, but I want you to have an open mind to see the root of this bias. Sometimes these biases are formed because of what your parents tell you about a group of people. Sometimes these biases are formed because of the stereotypes or the experiences that you have with certain people, or what you see around your surroundings. Other times it's because you inherently believe that these people are inferior to you. You actually have that belief, and that's usually something that it's in implemented in you since at a very young age. But this racial bias, it's not always, it doesn't always come from a white supremacist ideology. I think that's the mistake that many people do. We could all perform some sort of racial bias at some point. Sometimes you can, you can perhaps you can be in a neighborhood where majority are black. I'm using examples. You can be in a neighborhood where majority are black. You see a white person, and perhaps you think that this person is automatically a racist, so you treat them, and you somehow discriminate them. And everybody can discriminate somebody in one way or another. You can be a cop and you can discriminate. Yes, you can discriminate a white person. You can perhaps discriminate a white person, but and you can do that with so many people. You can be a cashier. You could always discriminate, but you're not going to discriminate somebody if you know that there's going to be consequences. Now, I don't understand how some white people continue to discriminate people who are non-white, given the fact that the media is pushing this racist agenda. Because now you can grab a cell phone and you can film a white lady yelling the N-word at you, and your whole career can be ended. But I guess they don't care about that pushback, because we do live in a society that somehow white people are racist no matter what. So it seems that they just rather be like, okay, if you're gonna call me a racist, well, then so be it. But I'm sticking to this thing. I want you to understand what this racist bias means, and bias in general. There's biasm when it comes to beauty. There's bias when it comes to gender, class, education levels, a different type of culture that you listen to. There's a lot of that. And sometimes the bias can actually come from a point of envy. I'm going to treat you like this because you are a rich person and you must be evil. You must be a greedy person. You don't care about the poor. Or you are attractive, so I'm going to assume that you are a snob and you're conceited. There's a lot of ways you can discriminate somebody. We live in a society, however, that if you are a position of privilege, then there's no way that you can be discriminated against. That's not true though, but that's what they teach in school. But because you don't have way of power, then there's no way. But the thing is that it's true. A cashier or a cop who would think twice about discriminating somebody with power. That's the reason why somebody can discriminate LeBron James, somebody can discriminate Michael Jordan, somebody can and the internet can call them the N-word and stuff like that. But if you are a cashier and you say that to LeBron James' face or Michael Jordan's face, and you go to a movie theater or a cashier and you say that, and LeBron James files a report to the manager, chances there's 100% guarantee that that person is going to lose their job. Why? Because there is consequences. But if that person, let's say the manager is a racist and the employee is a racist, and they do it to just a working class African American who discriminate him, then most likely that person's gonna get away with it. I doubt that this is gonna happen during this time because of the media attention. What I'm trying to say to you guys is that there's a difference between something that's operated in the system and something that is operated by individuals, humans, that can perform bias in any parts of the country and in any fields. For example, in California, there's a lot of favor towards Hispanics because of the stereotype that they're hardworking people. They prefer to have them in factories. They prefer to have them in construction jobs, construction companies, because of the stereotypes. There's also stereotypes of Asians that they favor them over the other races because of the intellectual and the IQ and the statistics that they do better off in college. There's bias in favor of African Americans when it comes to sports. Sometimes people who are non-black, they have to work harder to get what it is because of the stereotypes that they do better off in sports. So this biasm can actually come in different fields and different places and jobs. So I just wanted to clear that, because I think people need to understand that there is a difference between something that's implemented in the system and something that there is just bias in different sections. And I know that this, even if I share this, people will still have this disagreement because they interpret this systematic oppression that it's just part of I guess a majority, and it's just, it is very hard to to debunk that theory to people, because they believe because the origins of this country had racism, and we know that that's a fact, and one way or another there is still some sort of consequences, and they know this current states of African Americans do much worse in when it comes to in crime and poverty and all that stuff, but they always go back to race and they don't see the bigger picture, and they don't see a lot of things. But I do want to clarify that there's a difference between racial bias when individuals and something that's actually implemented in the system. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share. Just share my thoughts on that difference between systematic oppression and racial bias. So that's pretty much it. All right.